Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah Minnis, for those that don't know me, and I'm the current president of SURF. And I was a student who got involved with SURF back in the day, and it's been a really meaningful thing that I've done in my life, I suppose. And I really do encourage all of you to get involved with SURF actively. We have a lot of committees that you can be part of on a volunteer capacity. And we often have research assistant jobs available that are with our partners that we're partnering on research with that become available, or sometimes positions within our organization as well. And being on a committee is usually the best way to get the first ear to those positions, those paid positions. But if you do have some volunteer time, it's great for growing your network. It's great for adding to your CV or resume. And we really do value the contributions of grad students, probably a little too much. We rely on the contribution of grad students, and we're trying to fall away from that model where it's not a slave labor of your great minds and spirits. But we really, really do encourage you, if you want to get involved, you can visit our website at crrf.ca and look at ways to get involved. And yeah, there's lots of information there. So thanks for coming.
Awesome. And I see Ryan has actually just shared that link in the chat. So thank you, Ryan. You can check out that link right there if you would like. And we have one other person that I want to introduce you today before we get down to our own kind of discussions. And that is Peter Smith from the Canadian Centre for Rural Creativity. So the CCRC has worked with SURF and different SURF members on a few different things in the past. And them, like us, are working through a process of kind of sorting out an online kind of presence right now. So I'm just going to turn it over to Peter because he wants to introduce his organization and talk about some possible ways that you could get involved there, or that you might see yourself fitting in as well. So with that, I'll flip it over to Peter. You can unmute yourself and take it away.
Thanks, Kyle. I want to congratulate everybody that's on this call, but also I've been watching all day long. It's fantastic and concerning, and what's going on in the rural world is it's a lot to take in, and it's really impressive the amount of energy and passion that I've been feeling from the screen today. And I'm sorry that we are virtual, because I think it's so much better if we're face-to-face, but I think what you've been able to achieve here in this day has been inspiring for me and the gang that I'm working with to set up something called Rural Talks to Rural 20. And we've done these things every 2 years. And actually Ryan's been at every single one of them, presenting or doing something. And anyway, there are others around who have participated. This year, the theme is Crossing Divides, and we are doing a virtual conference, and we're spreading it over a couple of weeks rather than consolidating it into 2 or 3 days. So there'll be a lunchtime panel called This Rural Life that we'll do every lunchtime. And then in the evenings is when we're going to do the presentations, whether they be solo presentations or webinars or panels. And that information will be released, and you can look at it at ruralcreativity.org. But I want to talk to you just very briefly today about something called Passport to Research. And it's something that Valencia Gaspard, who I think most of you know, I think she sits on the board, and she may even be on the committee that organized this. Last year, she co-produced R2R with me and did a phenomenal job. And Passport to Research was her idea. What she wanted to do was bring some of the new research that's going on in rural Canada to Blythe, this town of 1,003 people. So through a process of howdy doodies and emails and phone calls, we chose 10 people from across the country who came and presented their work, and we spread the research throughout the building. If you've never been to Blythe, I encourage you to go there. They have a beautiful memorial hall. So we had people in the green room, we had people on stage, we had people downstairs in the lower hall, in the art gallery, spread out, and the audience were actually off their duffs, and they were moving, visiting, listening to the research, but it became a dialogue, not unlike I'm sure what's going to happen here in about 5 minutes. So we actually want to repeat that, and we're going to use breakout rooms instead of having the various spots in Memorial Hall. So next week, I'm meeting with Kyle and with Kathleen, and we're going to talk about it. But if the new researchers are interested in participating in that, I encourage you to get a hold of me. Kyle, you've got my coordinates, probably easier to just send them out that way, and to Kyle, and we'll talk about them next week. But anyway, it could be a Passport to Research virtual, it will be, and it'd be great to have the new thinking going on with regards to rural Canada down at Ardoir this year. And I encourage you to come out to Ardoir if you can. And that's all I'm going to say, and bless your hearts.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And I see Ryan is our master of the links here. He's sharing all the stuff we need in the chat. So please make sure you're checking that stuff, make a note of that, and check out that event. And feel free to reach out to Peter if that's something you would be interested in. So with that, I am going to move us into our kind of our core component of this. So really, the idea with the New Researchers Forum is just to provide, people with a chance to connect, to talk about what they're doing, to kind of discuss the issues that they're having. In the past, when we've met in person, sometimes there's been a specific focus, where we've talked about specifically about writing or specifically about building partnerships or some of these kind of different issues that new researchers were facing.
Saying thank you to everyone for their patience as we figured out how to move folks in and out of sessions and from the main room into the big one, and try to recreate some of the fun parts of conversations. And we do still have a bit of time on the clock to share as a bigger group or to think about some things at the end of the day or in this particular group. So I'll hand it over to Kyle to handle the remaining time however you'd like, Kyle.
Thanks. Honestly, I don't have a plan for this either. I would love if people want to share any reflections or kind of broader ideas about what they chatted about as a group. In our group, we had some just kind of interesting discussions about how everybody was working at different kind of places and how there was lots of challenges, but also opportunities that have kind of come about through the last 6 months. And, people were all working on different types of projects, so those looked different for different people. Yeah, maybe if I could turn it over to our leaders.
I can go, Kyle.
Yeah, awesome. I'll turn it over to you, Heather.
So in our group, we had a good mix of people working kind of in consulting and professional careers, and also a few people who were working within the university, either as graduate students, postdocs, or professors or retirees. And so we were discussing how I think in each of our contexts, especially early on, a lot of online survey especially, or phone survey and interview fatigue and engagement fatigue of people just being bombarded for information. And I think that's certainly understandable. A lot of the stakeholders that we typically engage with, and I think we probably can all agree on this, like to meet in person at events and share and build those relationships. And so that's really missing right now. That it's really difficult to build relationships, especially as a new researcher, if you're trying to set up a project in communities, particularly Indigenous communities, where trust and that relationship are so important. And add on that the layer of access to broadband, and you can see how there's challenges there. Travel restrictions. So one of our participants was in the field when all the COVID restrictions started coming out, and so having the need to quarantine, socially distance, what that means for your research, and having to ask questions about whether you can actually do your research in the same way that you had intended to, and if it needs to change, is that going to alter the questions and the approach to the detriment of the research project? Also, just the new areas that people are now expecting knowledge on. So some of our colleagues working in professional contexts, the new areas and files that they've had to work on, and the pace of responses and information and the need for that to be quick has certainly accelerated over the pandemic. And we had an interesting conversation just around, the tough conversations that we sometimes have with each other are now extremely hard to do kind of virtually. And so how do we navigate some of those tough governance questions when we're dealing with our stakeholders? So that was kind of our discussion.
Awesome, thanks. Maybe we can next flip it over to Ryan.
Sure, we had a great discussion and we had an incredible geographic diversity. We ranged from Teslin in the Yukon all the way to Charlottetown in Prince Edward Island. And we had a really good diversity of folks working on different topics, but also coming at it from both an academic, from a practitioner perspectives. Our conversation kind of focused around both the good and the challenges that have emerged from COVID-19 in terms of projects, whether that was around challenges that I'm thinking, Meg, in terms of your work at the archives and having limited ability to get in due to COVID restrictions. There may be other opportunities for projects that actually emerged because of COVID-19 and new relationships that were developed that wouldn't have existed with the pandemic. There was also a few opportunities where people mentioned that doing research was actually got a bit easier because their sample population was actually not mobile and not moving around and was able to be connected. So at the end of the day, there was a whole diversity of different topics that were being pursued and different varying impacts of COVID-19. The other pieces that we were chatting about that I think it might be an opportunity for a future conversation was around the Truth and Reconciliation Commission recommendations, how those are impacting and how rural communities and rural leaders and rural researchers are integrating that in partnership with Indigenous communities. And so that might be something that if there's an interest for a follow-up conversation, we had some great examples that were just briefly mentioned, but could be something that would warrant something that does warrant many, many more conversations on that front.
Awesome, thank you. And last but not least, I'll flip it to Ashleigh, because I believe Sarah's left us, right?
Sarah had to go pull the amazing second shift of mom duty to go pick up her son from the bus. So I know that we're all facing these competing demands. And I think that was a big part of our conversation as well, right? Was how do you manage all of these things on top of each other? We had great representation from around the country and actually internationally. I'm thinking, shout out to Magda who joined us from Slovenia. So that's pretty cool. So not only just Canada, but definitely international rural researchers. We had a breadth of people from east to west, so that was really great to have a lot of representation. Primarily sort of new researchers in academic contexts or people who are almost to the end of a PhD or have recently finished. So we were all in deep discussions around how to navigate the big part of your research journey as new academics in terms of completing dissertation during everything that's going on, completing fieldwork and some of the hiccups that have happened as a result of moving to virtual connections and what it means to be teaching and working and researching all at the same time, and how do you support others while supporting yourself as we kind of try to figure out how to operate in this context. I think we shared some really great conversations around how to move our research into publication. So how do you get it into not only journal articles, but into useful research outputs for decision makers and what the challenges are in terms of lining those up. We had some really great chats around, the value of these networks, how important it is to be able to connect with each other and create these kind of opportunities to support each other and engage with these processes. And particularly as a lot of things are uncertain, right? There's a few of us that are still trying to figure out fieldwork that had international components to it, or even domestic components that required travel and those kinds of things. And I just sort of put it over to anyone else in the group. I had to pop in and out a couple times to help people get to breakout rooms. So if I missed anything, feel free to chime in. But I did think it was really awesome that we had someone join us from an international context as well. So that was great. We truly are all in the same storm based on her experiences as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Moishde, you had just about finished the story, and I'd love to hear the end of it. And it's unfortunate the rest of you didn't hear the beginning of it, but you actually had a statement that really hung in for me. Not working, they were tasking, which is interesting when you're talking about rice in a field. But if you don't mind, people indulge me while she just finishes this story. I hate stories that are just about finished but aren't quite there. So do you mind, Moishde, just saying the end of that story about the phone calls and the rice and technology?
We're asking, Moishde does research in Iran, and we were asking her to share a story about some of the gender dynamics she was seeing when she was there in February doing her field work when COVID first came out.
Yeah, I told my other group members that I was in Iran during the pandemic, and it delayed my research, but I found some other ways to have connection with people and make connection with people and gather some data. One of the things I didn't know, it was like gender-based, I knew some gender-based cooperatives, but one of them was like for transplanters. Female transplanters had female-run cooperatives. The people who own land, women who own land, or mostly women from family who own land, shaped some cooperatives that they said they lend labor to others, to each others. They worked with each others, and then even they gave labor for other, they provided labor for other groups who didn't have transplanters. And it was interesting because it was such a thing that you may think as, okay, it's somehow balancing the gender gap we have in labor force, but actually it made it impossible for women to come to other fields. Okay, they had their own fields, and then when this technology came and machine is replacing women, men own the machine, men operate the machine, and then there is no way for interacting between women and men. You felt that, okay, because I'm from other province, I'm working in other province, and saw that, okay, there is some kind of social barrier for women to participate in men's job and men for participating in women's job, because for centuries there were cooperatives supporting gender labor. And it was interesting for me that when I was thinking of north of Iran, I was thought of like lowest gender disparity, but because of this social, because of the social system we had. But when I went there, I noticed that no, maybe it was in the beginning, but now with this transformation, we see these cooperatives are somehow banning the balance in gender, in labor force. And yeah, if you want to ask something, I can.
There's one thing I wanted to say when we were talking in our group and you were telling that story, just on how the technology being adopted and how that's impacting work and specific types of work. Ray Bowman, if he was still on the call, he was looking at some research too, to look at the types of jobs that are at risk of being automated here in Canada. And a lot of those jobs will be jobs in rural communities and also jobs that women typically have. And so I think there's a really interesting gender dynamic associated with technology adoption and what that means.
The other thing I know I was hoping to talk about in our group, but we didn't get to, was, did anybody like pick up some interesting tricks or like tips or tricks, like things that being forced to go online has like taught you? I know for me, it was that Microsoft Teams has an automatic transcribing tool. So if you do your interviews through Teams, you can download the transcript and it's already done. And that is something I never would have learned if I didn't have to start recording lectures on Teams. But know that that will be a future, like, we'll save hours and hours of research labor by being able to just do my interviews through Teams and download those transcripts that way.
I think WebEx can do it too.
WebEx is the same? Okay.
I think.
I'm just excited. We can't be that far away from automated translation too for these kind of conferences, if because Teams does the live kind of text. So all it takes is a Google, some genius to write a Google Translate hookup so we can start doing live translations without paying a translator. But yeah, I'd love to know if other people, had other things like that popped up that were like tricks they found, or even software or programs and stuff that have made life or productivity stuff easier or better.
I struggle with Teams because on my rural broadband connection, Teams eats up so much bandwidth that I can't actually, nothing else will load. Like browsers just go, you don't actually have a connection anymore. But our institution requires us to use Teams to do interviews and things like that, rather than Zoom and other low bandwidth things. But not to complain too much about that, but the other tools that I found that have been really helpful was we're just actually, I'm experimenting with it in a project right now, is actually using Mentimeter as an interactive group tool outside of a presentation. So you're able to, with certain educational subscriptions to Mentimeter, you can run that long term rather than just when you're presenting. And for those who aren't familiar with Mentimeter, people can log in from any device and add a code or use a direct link and respond to kind of interactive survey questions. And it's a really cool visual tool for kind of making things a little bit less survey fatiguey in terms of the standard questions. And so we're playing around with some of that right now. That's really helpful. And then the other one that we've done, and is maybe not a tool, is like there's a few people on this call that have actually been part of it, some friends and colleagues from CEDRED. We've been doing we've been replicating what we would have been doing as graduate students by having sort of a happy hour we were doing once a week for about an hour as PhD students, so that we could at least not lose our minds alone. And that's been really, really great. So finding those opportunities to connect with people. So maybe not a tool, but like a strategy so that you're not always alone. And then Kyle, this was a tip you gave me, which was like the virtual accountability buddy, which is just kind of making a date with somebody that sits on the other side of Zoom or Skype or Teams or whatever. And you just sit in silence and do your writing together. So for that 2-hour block, you're not being pulled in 8 different directions. You're actually focused on something. And that's been a lifesaver in terms of actually getting stuff done. So mix of tools and strategies. And I'll put the Mentimeter link in the other stuff. And yes, the happy hour, please join us for the happy hour after the GM tomorrow. It'll be a good time to just sit and enjoy each other's company. Those are a couple things that work for me.
Found technology breaks have been a good thing too. I feel like some days I spend so much time sitting in front of a computer and answering emails and doing other things to just have, whether it's 1 or 2 or how many hours a day, that's just a time to turn off from the technology has been helpful. But I know certainly for me, learning how to use survey software, so online survey software has been new on my plate. Those of you who know me know that I am not good with technology from the get-go and didn't even have a Google Gmail account before all of this broke out and needed one to help do all the editing on our Rural Insights. So pushed myself there. I still haven't got on Twitter. I'm holding out from that one.
I know that a lot of us do community engaged research, and creating relationships, such important relationships in that type of research, is really hard online. And I've been working with a few new communities during the pandemic. And yeah, having, especially when you didn't know each other very well before the pandemic, and then creating that relationship has been really tough. So I would be open to hear if anybody had any suggestions on how to do that online. We found that kind of just meeting often, but not for very long, has been pretty successful, but so open to any ideas anyone has.
One thing that we've been doing, we have a new project that's looking at the barriers that new immigrants to the city of Guelph and the county of Wellington encounter when using public transit and intercity transit. And so we have a really cool group of folks that are coming together, some partners, incredibly diverse and not partners that normally necessarily work together. And the one strategy that we have adopted is the good old coming together for lunch. And so we still do a lunch over Zoom, but the group actually determines which it's predominantly women's small entrepreneurs that will support, and everyone orders their meal from the same entrepreneur. And so everyone gets the same meal or a collection of the same pieces of the meal, and we meet over lunch. And it's been incredible that it's still informal, but yet it still has that ambiance of getting to know people and hearing about people's days before diving into the nuts and bolts. But it's been really great just to support local entrepreneurs, often new immigrants themselves, and to have those conversations. So it's been working well.
Something we're doing at Ardoir is we usually have great food at Ardoir. We will have no food, because we're virtual. It'll be food for thought. Anyway, we usually bring in the local chefs, and we were very fortunate to have some incredible people that can put together some decent meals. But also we have the bounty from the county. So there's a lot of food all around us. We're able to bring that. So it's fresh food. So this year what we're doing is James Eddington, who owns a restaurant in Exeter, is putting up a recipe card on the first day over the 2 weeks. Then he's doing a video step-by-step on how to make the meal that he's posted. And on the last Saturday, wherever you are in the world, you'll be sitting down at lunch, dinner, breakfast, having the same meal with everybody at the conference.
That's so fun.
I love that.
Yeah,
That
we're
is so
trying. Yeah, he's really up for it, and he's going to do a vegetarian thing and a meat dish, and he's got a salad and a dessert. So we'll see how it goes, but we really wanted to have a bite to eat somehow virtually, and I love, Ryan, your idea there of ordering from an entrepreneur and supporting local industry. For me, I just want to expose people to some of the great food that's happening out in Huron and Perth counties.
Eating M&Ms, but Sarah, I've been struggling too with some of the projects that we've gone on, and trying to use, if I already have existing networks that have connections to the new communities or organizations that I'm trying to build partnerships with, so that you can have someone who introduces or makes that facilitation. So that's, I think, one tip for the students. If you are trying to build those relationships, use us as your network. If we have connections into different communities, we can help kind of facilitate some of those relationships, if that's helpful.
Just to share on the front of maintaining community partnerships, the situation in Newfoundland is a little different, as a lot of you may know. It's pretty safe, as an urban resident, to visit rural communities right now. You have to kind of assess your own health situation first, but I've managed to keep partnerships going, including by one in-person visit, in which I remember I was the only person that I saw during the entire trip wearing a mask, because in most parts of rural Newfoundland, COVID just hasn't hit, fortunately. So it's just a really interesting and weird time, and it just really, what people are saying about the in-person being so valuable resonates a lot, because there have been one or two partners who are really willing to do things virtually, but for a lot of people, just putting in the time, going there, and having that in-person time is everything.
It's really interesting, Brendan. I know at Waterloo, we're not even allowed yet to do any in-person research with our projects. So, but it's true, the different contexts, there needs to be kind of, I think, relationships there, and understanding that it might need different approaches.
Well, you're still really not allowed, or it's very bureaucratic to do anything that requires ethics, or if you want to spend any money that sits at the university. But if it's just more of an informal connection or trip, then it's kind of, I think, at your own discretion and that of the people that you're meeting with.
One thing that is available that's in the chat box, but maybe Bill, you could speak to it, and it's something that I think everybody should hyperlink, is that tips and tools that you posted. It's a resource that I use in all of my classes, and I share it around. So I'm sure your royalty check is in the mail somewhere, but you might just give people a bit of an overview of what's there, because it's an incredible resource.
Thanks, Ryan. I should send any checks to you. But I have yet to see them. In any case, it's a series of suggestions that Fran, my wife, and I have developed over the years. So it doesn't mention COVID, since we've been retired for some time. But some of the main issues that it addresses are things like trying to come to identify a research project, and how do you proceed in doing such? How do you write a paper? There's a few tips around communication, around the issues, and I certainly reinforce, Heather, your point about, hey, use us, come on now. We're happy to help you find the links, that's certainly something that you'll find both SURF and the RPLC members willing to do. There's also a few sort of more technical things about, using some statistical software and so on. But most of the responses I get are around these issues of how do you deal with formulating research projects, designing them, making research designs, writing proposals, getting them past your committee and so on. And if there are other topics and you have other tips, I'm happy to add them to the list. I think it can be quite useful.
Oh, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you especially to the more senior members who joined us and helped facilitate discussions or just contribute and are offering some of those insights. I think one of the things that I find so important or meaningful with the SURF conferences is that support that we get from the more senior members who always come out and are supporting the younger and newer researchers and offering insights and all of those kind of great things. So thank you so much to everyone for joining us.
Thank you to everyone for joining us and having a great chat. And we'll see everybody tomorrow at 11 a.m. Eastern. And all the other times are listed on the site. But looking forward to a great chat. Thank you, everyone, for all of the time.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, everybody. Great seeing you all.
Bye.
Bye-bye.